Hi guys. Good afternoon everyone. Thank you. So today we're considering the second half of information topic. This time the firm will be the less informed party, and as a result it will try and prevent falling prey of adverse selection and moral hazard. But before we move to the topic of today's lecture, I just wanted to remind you about your midterm assignment, which went live on Wednesday last week after the last group had the last seminar, and will be due at midnight this Sunday, meaning the end of Sunday rather than the end of Saturday. This midterm assignment is not timed, so you can save it and go back to it. And it consists of 10 multiple choice questions and one short answer question. The short answer question asks you to explain what price discrimination is so that a non-economist can understand it. Now the key to getting a good mark for this question, because we realize it's not something you often have to do, is A, to avoid jargon, and B, to make sure whenever you define price discrimination, make sure the definition is general enough. You can, if you want to, talk about the 3 degrees, also describing them in simple words, but you don't have to. Either way, make sure to start with a general definition. Also in this question, you need to explain how price discrimination increases firms' profit. Now the potential caveat there is that price discrimination involves charging some consumers lower prices, right? And that's why many sort of laypersons consider it as a form of goodwill, right? That's why firms want to build relationship with their community, and hence they offer discounts to certain vulnerable groups. Now you need to show why this is not the case. You don't need to directly address this misconception, just explain how profit is maximized, why you always earn a higher profit as a firm compared to a situation when you charge the same price to everyone. Because the same price, it will be higher than the price you charge to these usually higher, not lower than the price you charge to these price-sensitive groups. You can explain this in your examples, or you can explain it separately as you wish. But in general, don't think too much about it. I expect you guys to do well on this. So it's just 200 words. Don't spend too much time on it. A key to solving a multiple choice question successfully is the following. For the ones where you need to calculate something, make sure to do it longhand and also use a shortcut formula. Make sure you get the same result by using both. For other multiple choice questions, which are more discursive, your lecture slides will give you all the answers you need. Don't need to go to the textbook. Right, so I hope that clarifies issues, but email me if you have any more questions. Now, today we are going to be continuing with our asymmetric information topic. Remember, we started last week's lecture by looking at different situations, different markets, and deciding whether it was the buyer or the seller, which usually is informationally disadvantaged. And we said that more often it's the buyer which is disadvantaged because they don't possess the object which is going to change hands, and clearly they know less about it. Now, businesses often play the role of a buyer, most importantly on the labour market, where they buy workers' labour hours. And we will consider hiring as an important asymmetric information market. Another situation in which firms act as buyers is mergers and acquisitions. And you might have read about mergers and acquisitions and how they're a hotly debated topic in business economics, because they very often destroy value rather than creating synergies, which everyone hopes for so much. We will see again how our models of adverse selection can explain this. Now, just to remind you, the two types of asymmetric information which give rise to two types of opportunistic behavior are hidden characteristics, which gives rise to adverse selection. Today we will look at a hiring example, which is a pre-contract information asymmetry, because you are screening your candidates before you offer them the job. And the hidden characteristic there is mostly the ability of the candidate. It can be their intelligence, it can be their productivity, it can be their people skills, whatever will help them increase your profit as an employer. But as we will be able to see, not only is it not in the candidate's interest to disclose their ability truthfully, sometimes the ways to help relieve this asymmetry, such as signaling, they actually made us as the society worse off. The second type of asymmetric information is hidden actions, which happens after the contract is signed. In terms of employment relationship, this has to do with, for example, workers shirking, not achieving production targets. And in terms of other markets, and in the insurance market, this has to do with a buyer of an insurance contract, engaging in risky behavior once they're insured. So we will talk about that and how insurance companies can mitigate those risks. So, as I said, we will look at three examples of limited information of firms today: mergers and acquisitions, hiring, and insurance policies, in particular adding excess clause, also known as deductible. We have seen before that adverse selection, meaning hidden characteristic, leads to lower quality goods being overrepresented in the market. We considered this simplified model where there were only two types of goods, a good car and a bad car, and we saw how good cars were completely eliminated from the market with only bad cars staying. We didn't model it formally, but we said that if there are more than 2 groups of products in terms of quality, then the better ones will be consecutively eliminated, and only the very, very worst ones will stay, which is kind of sad because much less than half of all sellers will stay in the market. Now let's see if the same works in hiring. The answer is, thankfully, there are efficient adverse selection elimination mechanisms which do work to help everyone find a job suited for their ability. Okay. This has no battery here, so I'm just going to use this microphone. Can you hear me all right? Good. Awesome. An added bonus that I'm not going to walk around and intimidate you by coming too closely to you. Okay, so in terms of hiring and unobserved ability, there are really 2 different situations which a firm can find itself in. The difference is whether its interests are aligned or misaligned with the interest of heterogeneous workers or candidates for the job. So what a firm really can hope for is that people will self-select to jobs because for some reason more able people would find undemanding jobs boring, whereas less able people would find demanding jobs too difficult. So this situation where adverse selection doesn't arise is represented in the table. Now, an important thing to note about this table is that even though it looks like a game, the rows aren't Amber's strategies, they are her types. So Amber can't choose whether she's high or low ability. By the way, if she could choose, which one would she choose? Sorry, between high and low. Which ability would Amber choose to be? High, very good, yeah, because the maximum she gets is a payoff of 3 as opposed to a maximum payoff of 2 for a low ability person. So if there's a mismatch, if a low ability person is in a demanding job or vice versa, then the person gets the payoff of 1. They're unhappy. Whereas a high ability person in the demanding job gets a very high payoff of 3. That means they don't find it too difficult, plus usually demanding jobs are more creative or pay better, and so they're very happy. Whereas a low ability person in the undemanding job is still happier than they would be in the demanding job. At least they can do the job all right and not get fired. Here, the firm also suffers if there is a mismatch. So the orange numbers are the employer's payoffs, and the employer gets a payoff of 1 if the worker is in the wrong type of job. So that would be bottom left to top right. However, the worker gets a higher than 1 payoff if the match is correct. In this particular example, the worker actually gets a maximum possible payoff if they hire a low ability worker in the undemanding job. Why do you think it's the case that they earn more than when they hire a high ability worker in the demanding job? It's an entirely open question. There might be more possible explanations than the one which I had in mind here. Well, usually you have to pay more in a more demanding job. And that's why they might be ending up with less profit if they hire a person in a more demanding job. That would only be the case, though, if the firm itself operates in a imperfectly competitive market. Because on the competitive market, as you know, they will be forced to, or they'll have to pay everyone the marginal revenue product of their labor. And then as long as there is a proper match of ability and job challenges, the employer will end up with the same profit. But here is a more common situation of a firm which is not a perfect competitor. Now, okay, here, if we have a situation like this, remember, the rows are types of the worker, not the strategy. If we add a communication stage to the game, where the worker comes and declares their ability to the firm, then the worker would be willing to declare their ability truthfully. And the employer's best response would be to trust this report. This will be a mutual best response. Imagine a situation where the person declares their ability truthfully and the employer trusts them. There's no, it sounds like an equilibrium because it's natural, but let's check. Does anyone have a profitable deviation? If an employer starts deviating and mistrusting the people, given that they tell the truth, they will end up with less profit. If the workers start deviating unilaterally and misreporting their ability, given that employer selects them to the jobs according to their reported ability, they will lose out again because they're better off in a job which matches their true ability. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. Otherwise, all CVs wouldn't look similarly good, right? We all want to put on our CV how great we are. And that's because most of the time, more demanding jobs are are preferred by both low and high ability workers. Usually they involve less routine work than undemanding jobs, and they are always better paid. So if we have a situation like this, where amber of both types, actually it's like this attention test. We have a worker called Amber, but her payoff is blue rather than amber, and amber is the color of the firm. That's confusing. I think I should probably change it. Whatever we call the worker, she always gets a higher payoff from being employed in a demanding job. In this situation, simple information transmission won't work. Remember how we considered market for lemons and we exercise the possibility of a communication stage between the seller and the buyer. But here, let's see what happens if a worker is allowed to declare their ability before she's offered a job. So that becomes a proper game, right? But unlike all the games we've considered before, in this game, not only do we have two different players, one of the players can have one of two different types. So it's not quite the same as having three players, a firm, a low ability worker and a high ability worker, because the firm doesn't know who it is facing. So it's the worker is one player but with two types. Now the strategy of the worker is their declared ability. It doesn't have to match their true ability, that's the whole point. That's why we denote their strategy by M, meaning message, and each type of a player, and that's the crucial difference between a game where there is no types. Each type acts completely individually, and they best respond to their opponent, being the firm's strategy, so as to maximize their own payoff. Different types have different payoffs in the same outcome. For example, when they are hired in the undemanding job, a more able type has an even lower payoff than a less able type. Now we will denote the high ability type strategy by MH, that's the variable, and this variable will take one of the two values, capital H or capital L. The same will be true for a low ability worker's strategy. Their strategy is ML and also can take the same values. So for example, if ML equals H and MH equals H, means that both types of workers declare high ability. Now the firm strategy, which we will denote simply by S for strategy, is a two-dimensional vector because it describes how a firm reacts to each possible report. Remember, strategy is a complete contingent plan, so it has to sort of consider all possibilities. So here the firm can place the worker in either a demanding or an undemanding job. So each dimension of the firm's strategy will take a value in this discrete set. It will be either D or U. Here's an example of a complete description of a firm's strategy. So SH, meaning the firm's response to a brilliant CV, which says I'm very smart, is to put the work in the undemanding job still, let them just be at the copy machine. And if their CV says I'm not very smart, they're still at the copying machine or making coffees for other people and so on. So the full description of a candidate equilibrium will involve three values. It will describe what the high ability worker does, what a low ability worker does, and what the firm does in each possible situation it can find itself in. Now, unfortunately, we can't really apply the equilibrium concept we studied before to this situation because remember we looked at Nash equilibrium and we looked at subgame perfect equilibrium. But both these concepts implied perfect and complete information. Meaning, if the game is dynamic, as this game is, you know what happened before. Or even if the game is static, you know what the payoffs of your opponent payoffs are. So when you're best responding to your opponent, you kind of, in equilibrium, you know what they do. Whereas here, if you're a firm and you're facing a worker of an unknown type, in equilibrium, a high ability worker might be doing one thing and the low ability worker might be doing a different thing. And so you can't calculate your deterministic payoff from any strategy because your payoff will depend on what the other player does and you don't know what they're going to do deterministically. So you will try and maximize your expected profit as a firm. Technically it's called Bayes Nash equilibrium. You know the Bayes statistical formula, how you calculate conditional probabilities. So because that's the way, if you for example, if you know that half of all smart people have great CVs and 10% of not so smart people have great CVs, given that you receive a smart CV, what's the probability that the person who sent it is smart, right? So that's the kind of probability you will receive here. Luckily, we won't look at this complicated equilibria. We will just look at two possible equilibria and see if either of them works. They're called separating and pooling equilibria, respectively. And by the way, that's the description of the game in a graphical form. So you can see, even though we only have two strategic players, the firm and the worker, we also have a non-strategic player known as nature. That's because how the game unfolds really depends on whether the worker has a high or low ability. We need to show it as some split in the tree. But who does this split? And we'd say it's nature who determines how much grey matter the worker has in their brain. And, well, in that particular case, it will be a 50-50 chance that we end up on top or in the bottom. Now, the second mover here, after nature, will be the worker themselves, and their move is whether they report high or low ability to the firm. Now, once they send their report, the firm doesn't know who the report comes from. So this is where the dashed line comes in. The dashed line connecting SH with SH on the left and SL with SL on the right denotes an information set. It means, from the firm's perspective, it doesn't know which node it finds itself in, the upper one or the lower one. And because of that, we can't solve this game by backward induction. Remember, when we solved Stackelberg oligopoly, or the entry game, which also were represented by a game tree, we found out who the last mover was. So it was the incumbent in the entry game. or the follower in the Stackelberg game, and because the last mover knew exactly what each of their possible moves leads to, they could just pick the most beneficial move for themselves. And starting from there, we can move upwards to the second to last move and so on. Unfortunately, here we can't do that, because when the firm receives a brilliant CV, when it's on the left-hand side, it doesn't know. For example, it picks D, right? The firm chooses to place the worker in the demanding job. It doesn't know whether it's going to end up above, where the payoffs are 3 and 2, or below, where the payoffs are 3 and 1. So, if the brilliant CV was sent by a high ability worker, the firm would prefer D over U, because 2 is bigger than 1. Remember, the firm is the last mover, so we're looking at the last numbers at terminal nodes. But if it actually is not such a smart worker, the firm will prefer U over D, because 4 is bigger than 1. But it doesn't know who sent the message, so it can't take the deterministic decision. And same applies when it receives a bad CV. So the way to solve it is to solve it analytically. So we hypothesize that a certain strategy profile might be in equilibrium, and we check whether it's a mutual best response. So, as I said, there are two possible types of equilibria, separating and pooling ones. As the name suggests, separating equilibria is the one where everyone sends different messages. And let's see if this equilibrium works. So let's see what the firm's best response to this strategy is, to declaring a true ability, and then we need to check again whether declaring a true ability will be a best response. We kind of touched upon it already. So if the worker does report their ability truthfully, so the business knows they can ever end up only at the top left or the bottom right, then their SH is equal to D, and their SL is equal to U. They trust the message. They put the worker in the job according to the declared ability. However, once we know that this is the firm's best response, if we were to make those vertices, make those edges bold in the diagram, then it's not the worker's best response anymore to declare the true ability. If the firm trusts the worker, then a low ability worker would rather lie and pretend their ability is high. So it's not a mutual best response, the separating equilibrium. So we say that the separating equilibrium does not exist here. Now, last possibility is a pooling equilibrium, where both candidates send the same message. It doesn't matter what the label of the message is, high or low, because it's meaningless either way. But we would say it is high. Everyone tries and writes the best possible CV they can, right? Now, suppose everyone sends the high message. It means that the firm always finds itself at the left-hand side of this diagram. And they know that if they put the worker in the demanding job, they will get either 2 or 1 with equal probability, because half of all the people are high ability and half are low. And if they put the worker in the undemanding job, they will get either 1 or 4, again with equal probability. And simply from the expected profit perspective, they prefer to put this worker in the undemanding job, because it gives them the higher expected payoff. So you see, this result crucially depends on the split of high and low ability workers in the population and on the firm's profit. Now, okay, that's a bit of a tricky part. Technically, Bayes-Nash equilibrium also describes what a firm believes is going on if it receives a message which is not part of an equilibrium. So here we're looking at a situation where everyone sends a brilliant CV. What happens if suddenly someone sends a really bad CV? Would this person be accepted into a demanding job? Well, a natural way to say is probably no, right? So, but in this equilibrium, we're completely free to be creative and think whatever the firm does in this situation. So let's say from real life kind of standpoint, a really bad CV would land you in an undemanding job. And in this case, sending the same message is a best response of the worker to the firm. So the first half of the slide was us establishing what the best response of the firm is to everyone sending the high message. And that was put everyone in the undemanding job. Given that the firm puts you in the undemanding job, whatever message you send, you can't unilaterally increase your payoff by sending a different message. So there's no profitable unilateral deviation for either the firm or the workers. And that's why pooling equilibrium is an equilibrium of the game. Okay, so what are the usual ways out of this situation? How can a firm screen your true ability, or how can you signal your true ability? Yes, please?
You can give your grades, or they can test your interview.
Very good. So you can send your transcript with your grades, so they can do their own test. Which of these methods you think is better from the firm's perspective? Testing or looking at your grades?
Testing.
Why do you think so?
Because it's more catered for the needs of the firm, rather than if you've done a GCSE in history, but you're going into banking.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, it is more suitable for the firm's needs. It has an opportunity cost though, right? Because you have to run the test yourself as opposed to relying on just the transcript. Yeah, but education is a strong signal you can send. And it turns out, even if you had your education in history and applying for banking, assuming history departments don't just accept everyone, you are still signaling your high ability. And applying this to our favorite subject of economics or economics-related disciplines, there's a certain paradox which you might have observed. I don't need to tell you that because you guys know it better than anyone else, that economics has come under lots of criticism as a subject which is not very realistic, and it's all about those game theory models based on Nash equilibrium. No one's ever going to apply that. And not only is it not related to real life, it also is all underpinned by dangerous free market ideology, right? There's been lots of criticism of economics, standard economics curriculum, not only by correspondents, by all sides of educational process. If you see who this article quotes, for example, okay, students in Manchester, you guys are famous, are unhappy about the curriculum, but also the employers. Right, so you see that employers are questioning whether any useful skills are learned and so on. I think parents are also unhappy, and the government as well. So it looks like economics degrees don't teach you any good skills, but despite that, you do get paid a lot if you do an economics degree. Presumably, employers aren't that stupid, so if they hire economists and pay them, then it must be for some good reason. But if it's not the skills, what is the reason? So, a simple model explains it by just assuming that getting a degree is harder for low ability people. So look at how this table compares to our original table. Remember, in the original table, a high and the low ability candidate both got a payoff of 3 if they are in a demanding job. So this is the kind of jobs we saw in the article, economists being in the top 1% of income distribution because they work for consultancies and investment banking. So suppose education doesn't teach you anything, but you suffer a cost of 2 if you're a low ability person and a cost of 1 if you're a high ability person, simply because it's more of hard work for low ability people. In this situation, we subtract those numbers from 3, and we can see that adverse selection has been completely eliminated because the interests of the employer and the worker are now aligned. The employer simply now makes a higher education degree a requirement for a demanding job, and that means that low ability people would not think it's worth it for them to get the degree, and they will prefer to go to the undemanding job and get a payoff of 2 rather than 1. Now the next question is whether it is, because here we just assume the employer will create this requirement. The next question is whether or not it is in the employer's interest to require it. After all, before they were happily employing everyone in the undemanding job and getting an average payoff of 2.5. So in your seminar question sheet, you will model this game as this tree where Amber chooses whether or not to go to college. And you see what we're going to get. Okay. Oh, by the way, one thing I want to tell you is that your core textbook, unfortunately, doesn't consider these topics. So at the beginning of the lecture slides, you have a link to a different textbook by the same author. And chapter 18 deals with asymmetric information. Okay, so our next application is mergers and acquisitions. Here's some more information from the real world for you. When you guys graduate and become the highest earning graduates of all disciplines, don't advise your CEO or the owner of your company to engage in too many mergers and acquisitions. Apparently, slightly over half of all M&As destroy shareholder value, according to KPMG. And according to a different source, the empirical research partners, companies who actively acquire, they end up with very negative returns. So see here, the returns are around 0 for companies which don't go into too many M&A deals. Actually, if you don't engage in any M&A in 3 years, it's not very good for you. But staying slightly above 0 is the best. And then if you engage in more than 20, then you get sharply negative returns. So the question is, why do most mergers and acquisitions end up in a loss for the acquiring company? We're going to use game theory again to answer this question. Remember, we said buyers are usually informationally disadvantaged, and the same goes for acquisitions. So just like lemons are overrepresented in the car market compared to plums, we will see that underperforming companies will be purchased more often than overperforming companies. To show that, consider the following business problem. So suppose you are considering acquiring a different company, and you don't know what the exact value of your target is. Of course, you can see some of their books, but not all, and you haven't been working in this company. So either way, from your point of view, the value of this company is a random variable. We will call it capital X. It's the value of the company to its current owners, to be precise. Anyone who's considering mergers and acquisitions hopes that they will be able to manage the target company better. So we need to distinguish between these two things, how much the company is worth to the current owners and how much it will be worth to you. However, this X, you don't know. Suppose we just consider the simplest case, where the uncertainty is really as mild as it can be. In real life, it's even harder. Suppose X is a discrete random variable uniformly distributed between 0 and 100, meaning it can be any number in between 0 and 100 with equal probability. Now, if you love maths, you'll be able to solve this equation in your head. You can see it has 101 terms which you need to add up. It's not trivial, right? The trick to solve it is to notice that if you get rid of the first one, then the second and the last one add up to 1, and then the third and the second to last one add up to 1, and so on, and you have 50 of those. So if a company is worth anything in between 0 and 100 with equal probability of 1 over 101, you don't need to actually solve this expected value. You can just reason that on average will be worth 50, as this histogram suggests. Okay, so actually you know more than nothing. You know that the companies are worth 50 on average, but can be anything less or more with an equal chance. As we said, if you're hoping to acquire this target, you're hoping to improve management processes in it. And let's say if you acquired it, you could increase its value by 1.5 times. So here's the distinction. Remember, capital X was the random variable, whereas lowercase x is the value within this random variable, or the value this random variable can take. So if lowercase x is the value of the company to its current owners, to you, it will be worth 1.5x. So an average target is worth 1.5 times 50 to you, which is 75. So that's great news, because it means that not only for any given company there are significant gains from trade, because whatever the company is worth to its owners, it's worth more to you, so you can meet somewhere in the middle by trading the company for an average amount of money, and you both will be better off. But not only is it true in each particular case, it's true on average as well. So we've described what the players are in the game and what the payoffs are, but we didn't describe what the strategies are. The strategies here will describe how the bargaining proceeds. So we will have a one-stage bargaining here, a take-it-or-leave-it offer. So you suggest an amount Y. Y is your strategy. Remember, X is not a strategy, it's just an unknown number. And then the target company either takes it or leaves it. If they accept your offer, then they pass the company over to you. So they will get Y minus X. They will gain the money you paid them, lose the company, the value of the company to them. Now, for you, it's not just the opposite. Otherwise, people won't trade if things were worth the same to everyone. You gain 1.5x, and the cost is Y to you. The amount of money Y is the same. The value of the company changes when it changes hands. Now, if they reject the offer, the company doesn't change hands, and bargaining ends. In reality, it's usually not a one-step process. There is sequential bargaining involved, but the prediction of this simple model will still be remarkably accurate. Now, okay, so now we need to find the best response of both players in this game. Okay, remember that it's a dynamic game, so the last mover here, after you made an offer, the last mover is the target company. And their strategy you need to describe it's not just a yes or no. It describes to which offers you say yes and to which offers you say no. It's a rule of assignment. So in which case should they accept your offer? For which values of y should they say yes to your offer? If 1 minus x is greater than 0, that's awesome, thank you very much. Yeah, because that means the net present value is positive, which is great. I love the NPV approach. Or, yeah, I put a more simple approach, obviously equivalent. They should agree if your offer is higher than the value of the company to them. Now, suppose you made an offer of 50 and it was accepted. Now, that means that we are dealing with the left-hand side of the original probability distribution. Importantly, the fact that your offer was accepted doesn't change the shape, right? Remember, it's still unilaterally distributed. The company is still equally likely to be anything in between 0 and now your offer, right? Because if they accepted it, it means it must be worth less than your offer. So if your offer was 50 and it was accepted, then that means that the company, on average, is worth 25 to the current owners. Now, by itself, it's not necessarily very bad news, because remember, the company is worth more to you than to them. However, because it's only worth 1.5 times more to you than to them, so its expected value to you is going to be 1.5 times 25, which is 37.5, which is less than 50. So you just made a loss by offering 50. Okay, at this point, shall we have a break and come back here at 5 o'clock? Hello. Do you apply 7? Are you going to write 7 at first stage? Cool, thank you. Yeah, and then I guess they will contact you directly, right?
Yeah.
No, and it's better not to, otherwise
I was going to say it's going to take the word cab up. Okay, thank you so much.
Right, guys, shall we go back to the lecture? I think one of your colleagues asked me a question which I think forced me to explain it in a bit more detail. So just to reiterate, why is it that if your offer of 50 has been accepted, then that means that on average this company is worth 25. So instead of thinking about probabilities of each company being worth a certain amount, think that, suppose there are only 100 companies in the world which you are considering, and they all have different values, ranging from 0 to 100. And if you you don't know which company you're facing when you're making an offer, but suppose you made an offer of 50 and the target accepted, it means that you're facing one of the 50 companies whose value ranges between 0 and 50. And so on average, the value will be 25, because there are only 50 such companies who would accept your offer. I think that applies to marriage, right? I think that because why do people get married? I think one of the very good reasons is to lock your partner down, right? So that to increase the breakup costs so they don't dump you. That's at least why I got married. I don't know about other people. But the thing is, if you propose to your partner in order to increase their breakup costs and they say yes, why did they accept this? It's such a bad deal you offered them, right? You offered them to, just voluntarily impose additional costs on themselves in a certain state of the world, right? In case they meet someone better. So they accepted it means two things. Either they didn't think it was very likely that they're going to meet someone else, or maybe the divorce costs aren't that high for them as you thought. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. So in either way, if a proposal was accepted, that means it shouldn't have been made in the first place, which I think is a big secret no one tells you about when you're in your early 20s. But you can't then retract your proposal, because if it's retractable, that means it's not credible, so it becomes an incredible threat. I told all this to my husband, and he said, "Oh, game theory bullshit again." So maybe it's one of those economics pieces of wisdom which make journalists ask questions, are economics degrees good for purpose? But anyway, for mergers and acquisitions, this logic does work. As you've seen, most of them destroy value, and this is why. You offered 50. Your offer was accepted. It is bad news it was accepted. It means the company is worth an average 25, so to you it will be worth an average 37.5, 1.5 that. That means you just made a loss. You made a loss of only minus 12.5, not a big one, but you also made a loss in expectations. Maybe you were lucky. Maybe you made an offer of 50 and the company you encountered actually has a value of 40. So it will be worth 60 to you, and you will have made a profit in this particular case. But if you make enough of those offers, if you try and acquire enough companies, on average you will average out with a loss, as KPMG data showed us. So we used 50 as an example, but you can appreciate how this logic can be extended to any offer you make. Suppose you made an offer of Y and it was accepted. That's all right. It's very quiet here today, so I think a bit of waking up. noises is good. So we showed that whatever offer you made, then the company will be worth an expectation half of that because of the uniform distribution. If the company is worth half of that to the current owners, then to you it will be worth 1.5 times half, which is 0.75. So remember, your profit is the value of the company to you minus your offer, and the value of the company to you would always be 3/4 of your offer in expectation. So you will end up with a loss of 1/4 of your offer, whatever offer you make. So now you guys are very good at differentiation and optimization. If your objective function is minus 0.25y, which y should you choose to maximize this function? 0, very good, because that's the smallest loss you can possibly make. That means the best offer to make is no offer at all. So negative expected loss explains why most M&As end up with value destroyed for the shareholders. So just to remind you, not all M&As will destroy value, but the majority of them will. That's what negative expected value means. And our solution to the game, which is an optimal offer is 0, explains the diagram we saw, which showed that companies which engaged in fewer M&A performed better than those who engaged in more of them. So this is known as buyer's curse or winner's curse. And you can see how it is related to the situation of bidding in common value auctions we considered. We didn't really look into them at seminars, but you remember the gist of it. Common value auctions have an object which is being auctioned, which is worth the same to all participants. So it wouldn't be art auctions, it would be auctions for something which can be appraised objectively. And because everyone has different information about this object, if you are more optimistic, that means you probably than others. That means probably you're overvaluing the object. And it's more optimistic people who submit higher bids, and then those people who submit higher bids who win. So if you win the auction, it's bad news. It means you overpaid. Okay, so both examples we've looked at so far have to do with adverse selection. Now, moral hazard is another type of asymmetric information, and also the subject of the most recent economic theory Nobel Prize, which was given to Hart and Holmstrom, who looked at how asymmetric information happens and affects hiring as well. So, but we will look at insurance companies, because insurance companies deal with moral hazard all the time. So we'll be looking at situations when once you get insured, you start, you change your behavior, basically. So unlike adverse selection, this is something you can change, the hidden action. For example, you drive carelessly, or you leave your house unlocked once you know it's insured. Obviously, by doing this, you're not decreasing your expected payoff, because you're not bearing the risk, but you're decreasing the payoff of the insurance company. And hence, they will be interested in dealing with this, trying to reduce your risky behavior. Obviously, one way to do it is to just put a clause in the contract which explicitly prohibits these behaviors, or says that you won't be compensated if an insurable event is caused by these risky behaviors. And this is why when you insure your house, you have to put exactly how many smoke detectors you have and where. An alternative method is to put an excess in the insurance policy, also known as deductible, well, in America, for example. So when you guys are buying holiday insurance, you probably will have noticed how different the prices are depending on how much of an excess you're happy to pay. The zero excess policies are very expensive. And, well, this being said, the excess in your regular policy is usually not that big. It would be something in between 100 and 200 pounds. Just to remind you, an excess is the amount which you have to cover out of pocket before the insurance company compensates you for the rest. So, for example, for car insurance, that's how much you have to pay for damages before the insurance company covers the rest. And if you really want to have a zero excess policy, you usually have to pay a premium which would be maybe like a tenth of the price of the full premium, not a hundredth. And then we will see why. Even though the size of the damages, the possible maximum damages, are huge. You would think, why does the insurance company care about this small number? For example, on average, accident results in thousands being paid out in insurance cover. So 100 which you pay out of pocket really shouldn't matter for the insurance company. In particular, consider an insurance contract which costs £80 to you in premium and covers you against accident damage. Average accident damage is 2,500. And you have an option of, well, the standard insurance policy where you do have to pay 10 towards 2,500 or whatever your actual damage is, suppose it costs 18 quid. That's how much it would usually cost if you're buying a short-term accident insurance for a rental car, let's say. Now, there's always been an option to take out a zero excess policy and pay slightly more than 18. So if the zero excess policy was actuarially fair, remember actuarially fair means you are charged exactly the expected value of damage. Then let's see how much it would cost. If the company is charging you 18 quid to cover you from a damage of 2,400, it means that the insurance company, who is itself risk neutral, must believe that accidents happen in 0.75% of all cases, if it is actuarially fair. So that's the maximum probability of a case they could believe, right? Remember, the insurance company is making money because it is risk neutral and it's selling insurance policies to risk averse people. Now, if instead it had to pay 2,500 instead of 24, that means that on average it would only have to pay 75p more. Right? So if zero excess policies were also priced in an actuarially fair way, they would cost on the 75p more. In reality, they would cost several pounds more, on sometimes even twice as much. So something is happening here. That means some number in our original calculation must be wrong. So which one is it? Well, we only have two numbers really in the left-hand side of the equation. It's 2,500 and 0.075. One is the size of the damage and the other one is the risk that this damage happens. So which one is wrong, you reckon? If you solve this, you'll find a way to make money off insurance companies, by the way. By the way, let's assume everything we calculated before is correct, right? That they charge you £18 for a cover of 2,400. So when we try and calculate how much they should charge you for a full cover, 2,500, okay, yes please.
It's not the risk,
choose zero excess policy according to the discrepancy between this result and the actual price increase on the zero excess policies. People who take out zero excess policies must be more careless or more riskier. So if you yourself know that you are a careful driver, never buy zero excess policies because they're overpriced. They're priced for careless people. We will look at behavioral economics next week, but this is one of the pieces of advice which Richard Thaler gives in his book, Nudge. That's, as an individual who mostly acts as a consumer on the market, the single biggest impact you can have on your financial outcomes is to always choose the biggest possible success. And then over your lifetime you will save quite a lot of money, like this. Okay. We're through the slides, guys, and there's a surprise for you, which I prepared. There's a revision test, which hopefully will help you do better in your midterm exam. So if you go to socrative.com, choose student login, and enter the room number, you'll be able to take part in the revision quiz. I'm not going to require names, because whenever I require names in those quizzes, some people write, I've seen it as the name thing. It's just... Is it working? Has anyone entered yet? Oh, awesome. Got 19 students. Very good. Right, so it's multiple choice quiz. Please choose the answer, and then we will look at the results. Does it launch? Can you see the questions or not yet? Right, thank you. So right. Awesome. You should see the questions now. Right, not going to show you the answers yet. We're going to see which questions were more difficult and which might require extra help. 6 questions in total. Oh, sorry, it's a typo. It should be 3/4 here.
Yeah, it's 1/3 and 2/3, right?
It's a quarter and 3/4 actually.
Quarter and 3/4.
I remember because we have this,
Makes sense. Yeah, okay.
Right, guys, everyone gets an extra point for question 3 because there's a typo in the answers. Yeah, apologies for that. There's the correct answer is 1/4 and 3/4, remember? Because that way everyone travels for at most a quarter. Thank you very much for saying that, yeah. It's not 1/3 and 2/3 though. Thank you. Aha. So question 5 was a bit hard as well. Okay, tourist trap model. Remember, it's one of the paradoxes we encountered in this module. With 2 firms, you have lower prices than with many firms. So when you decrease the number of firms, the prices will decrease as well. Which is the opposite of our result in usual markets, where more firms means more competition and lower prices. Okay. Okay, Cournot best response functions. Remember, they tell you how you would like to change your output if the opponent increases their output. If they increase their output, they're really damaging your price. So you want to decrease your output to compensate for the drop in price which your opponent caused. Hence the downward sloping. Right. Final question. Most people got it right. Remember, when a more informed party initiates an action, it's signaling. But when a less informed party, for example, the insurance company, initiates an action, it's screening.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Oh, so there are 3 methods of solving adverse selection. If a more informed party tries to solve it, it's called signaling. For example, I know more about my health. I go and do voluntary tests and bring the results. If a less informed party tries to solve it, it's called screening. For example, insurance company screens all the applicants in terms of their health. And if the government tries, or the third party tries to interfere, it's usually government regulation. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Wow, some people got the question 3 correct despite the typo. That's great. By the way, your exam papers get moderated by 2 different people apart from me, so there will definitely be no typos there. Shall I post this, but without the typo, on Blackboard? Just to, yeah? Cool, will do. Most people got the degree of price discrimination correct. Advanced fares versus off-peak separates all consumers into 2 groups. People who know their plans and people who want to be flexible with their plans. And people who need to be flexible have to be less price sensitive and they buy off-peak tickets. So it's group price discrimination, also known as 3rd degree. Someone thought, nah. Right, thank you very much to everyone for taking part in this, and I'll see you next week for behavioral economics. Oh, sure. Oh, sorry. So here, because the worker can be different ability, can they act differently if they have different abilities? So it's as if they're two different players. So we can't have them on the same note choosing because the result will depend on what ability you have. The first thing we need to do is we need to kind of separate the decision of a high ability worker and the decision of a low ability worker. That's why I have a player called nature. So how the game evolves. First, the ability of the worker is randomly determined. We end up here. Then this worker chooses whether to send a high or low message. To say I'm very smart, or to say I'm not so smart. Once they send the message, then it's the firm's turn to act. Yeah, and they can either put this worker in the demanding job or the undemanding job. You see, the problem for the firm, and that's why we have these the dotted line, is that they don't know whether they're here or here. All they can see is your CV, which says, oh, you're brilliant. But the firms, if they choose to put you in a demanding job, we don't know whether a payoff is a firm will be 1 or 2, whether the undemanding again is a 1 or 4. So if everyone sends this message, so a firm knows that the probability is 50-50, its expected payoff from choosing D is 1.5. His expected payoff from choosing U is 2.5, so it will choose U. Whereas if workers send different messages, like this, then the firm knows exactly where it is, right? It knows, oh, good people send good CVs, and obviously 2 is a bit better than 1, so I'll choose this. Bad people send bad CVs, so I will choose this, because 4 is better than 1. But once the firm chooses these particular actions, right? And the low ability worker, they don't like ending up with 2. They would very much prefer, actually, to end up with 3. So they will instead send the high message. Remember, the worker, the firm doesn't know it's here, it thinks it's here in the separating equilibrium. And so it will put them in the demanding job and give them 3, but itself will suffer because it will end up with a payoff of 1. And that's why it's not an equilibrium. So remember, our candidate equilibrium will work like this. And we can say that the low ability worker has a profitable deviation by changing this choice they made to this choice. And then from the firm's point of view, the firm will think it's here and then will go here. But from the worker's point of view, they know that they actually are here and they end up with 3 and the firm will suffer, it will get on.
That's the equilibrium, this route.
Unfortunately not, you see, because there's this profitable deviation. Then the equilibrium we have is this and this. Everyone says I'm very smart and everyone gets a really, really boring job.
So what about here? What is this? This way?
Oh, but well, let's check that. Suppose for some reason low ability people say I'm very smart, high ability people are modest and they say I'm not so smart. In this case, if the firm again can can tell whether it's above or below, right? So to these people who say I'm not smart, it will say, I don't believe you, I'll give you this, because I know I'm here, and 2 is better than 1. Whereas to these people, it will say, oh, I don't believe you either when you say you're smart, I know that I'm below, so between 4 and 1, I will choose 4 and I will put you. But if our candidate equilibrium now looks like this, then again, these people have profitable deviation because they can claim low ability, and the firm will think it's here. Remember, in here it chose to give D, so they will trick the firm into thinking their ability, that the firm is here, and they will end up here, and the firm will suffer. So it will break down, so not the best response. Because of that.
Sorry, can you explain this way again?
Yeah, actually, maybe it's better if we write it separately. Sorry, do you mind if I write on your slides? Just yeah. So let's check the equilibrium. Well, the candidate profile where everyone tells the truth, but where everyone tells the opposite of the truth will be structurally the same. So suppose the high ability worker says I'm smart, and the low ability worker says I'm not so smart. So what is the firm's best response to this? The best response, remember, looks like this. What kind of job I give to the smart person, what kind of job I give to the person who says they're not so smart. So can you write U or D here? U means, yeah, what will firm do when it lists what?
Should be D here.
Yeah, and the reason it's D is because it's the best response to this. The firm knows that people report truthfully. Very good. So we've just established that this is the best response to this. Check. Remember, an equilibrium should be a mutual best response. So let's now check if this is the best response to that. Remember, they can change what they say. They don't have to tell the truth. Okay, is this guy, is he best responding to this strategy? Can he improve his situation by changing it from H to L?
Not really.
That's right, because he ends up, he says H, he keeping his opponent's strategy fixed, he's doing the best thing for himself.
Yeah.
How about this guy? Can he improve his
Yes,
situation?
it would just
Yeah, because if he says H, then the firm, because the only thing they receive is a message, they will give him a demanding job. So this is not the best response. So it's not a tick, it's a cross. That means that this cannot be an equilibrium. Whereas if we look at a pooling one, where everyone says the same thing. Oh, sorry, everyone says they're high, the message is H and low. And the firm sends everyone to make coffee. SH.
yeah.
Is that the best response to that?
Yes.
Yes, because here, if you change it, you will get 1.5 instead of 2.5. Yes. So this tells you what you do, which job you give to the person who says they're high ability, right? Because it can be either of those. With a 50-50 chance, if you give them a low, undermining job, you're either here or here, so the average is 2.5. Your payoff here is 2.5, and it's better than your payoff of 1.5 if you give them a demanding job. So it is a best response. Tick. Is this a best response? If you're given an undemanding job, whatever you report, can you unilaterally improve? No. So it is a best response because you can't unilaterally improve. So best response, tick. Mutual best response. So it works.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Good question. Hello. Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, no problem. It's not a long question. I heard you say on, I don't know if it was like a lecture or a tutorial, you want about doing virtual tutorials?
Oh yes, I'm happy to record them on something which isn't very clear. Is
No.
there anything which you would want me to
Oh,
record?
I'm trying to think. Enough. Well, I can't think of anything in particular. You just mentioned it, and I didn't know if you were recording them or whatever.
No,
Just because I
yeah.
thought they'd be useful. That was all I did.
Oh, awesome, yeah. My original thought, and tell me if that would be useful, was about differentiation, which we use for Corno.
Yeah,
because I
the
think-
maths part of the corner.
Is it?
thing.
Cool, I'll do that because
That'd be brilliant.
yeah, that must have been like 2 years ago now, right, that you had the math module. So that's something which is worth refreshing, I guess, right?
It's just like, it's just something that's like, this is silly, but like, it's like completing the square and factorize of math. I haven't done that for like ever. When you were going through it, you went through it quite quick, obviously, 'cause it's like second nature, and I was like, missed a few steps. That was it.
Right, so not just the differentiation, but how also we simplify the factorized, right?
Is that alright? I know it sounds
Yeah,
really silly,
absolutely.
so I know it's really basic. I just,
No, it's not. No, I mean, it's the hardest bit is the math. So yeah, I will record that. So it will look like just a screen with me writing
Yeah.
on it. Yeah.
okay, thank you very much.
No, thank you for reminding me. Answer. Good point. See you next week.